Welcome back. It's Finance Friday, another special edition of Money Girl where I answer your burning money questions. Today's topic comes from Helene G., who says, I love your podcast and always learn so much from you. I'm 60 and got laid off multiple times, leaving me with severe work-related anxiety. I mostly live on a severance, but also have a dream job working at a garden center. It pays a third of my previous salary, but has about 1% of the stress. I sold my home and built a little apartment in my best friend's basement, reducing my basic monthly expenses to less than $1,000. My only debt is a car loan balance of $3,700 at 2.79% interest. My income covers my costs and allows me to save for retirement. I have a traditional IRA that I hope not to need for many years. Should I withdraw $3,700 from my IRA to pay off my car and be debt-free? My quarterly statement shows an average return of about 3.5%. I also have high interest savings of several months' expenses that I can use to pay off the car. If you were me with an anxious personality, would you take an IRA withdrawal to pay off the car for more peace of mind? Thank you so much for your question and kind words, Helene. I'm really glad you've successfully reduced your expenses for a lower stress lifestyle. That's got to feel great. This podcast will answer Helene's question and review the rules and updated penalty exceptions for taking IRA withdrawals. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining me on episode 877. I'm Laura Adams, an award-winning author, finance spokesperson, money speaker, founder of The Money Stack, which is a Substack newsletter, and host of Money Girl with over 43 million downloads. If you're getting value from the show, do us a quick favor and submit a 5-star rating or review. That really helps us out. If you have a question about money for the show, you can leave it on our voicemail at 302-364-0308. You can also send me an email and sign up for the free Money Stack newsletter when you visit lauradadams.com. All right, so let's talk about the traditional IRA withdrawal rules. Before you or Helene dip into your IRA, you've got to understand the withdrawal rules. In general, a withdrawal before age 59 and a half is considered an early distribution. So that means any amount not previously taxed would be subject to income taxes, plus an additional 10% penalty unless an exception applies. And since Helene is 60, an IRA withdrawal is no longer early for her. It's not subject to an additional 10% penalty. The only consequence of tapping her traditional IRA would be paying income taxes on the distribution. So let's talk about the exceptions. Let's say, you're younger than Helene, you're younger than 59 and a half. You need to know that there are exceptions when you can avoid the 10% penalty, but not income taxes on a traditional IRA withdrawal. The IRS lists 17 penalty exceptions for IRAs, with some that began in 2024. So let's go through them. Number one is age. As I mentioned, after you reach age 59 and a half, you no longer must pay a 10% withdrawal penalty, no matter why you take traditional IRA distributions. And so this is, Helene's exception, her age. The second is birth or adoption. If you take distributions up to $5,000 per child for a qualified birth or adoption, those expenses, that distribution won't be subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. Number three, death. If you die, neither your estate nor your account beneficiary is subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. 4 is disability. If you become permanently disabled, your distributions are not subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. 5 is disaster recovery distribution. If you have an economic loss due to a federally declared disaster where you live, up to $22,000 won't be subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. Number 6 is domestic abuse victim distribution. This one's new. If you're the victim of domestic abuse by a spouse or domestic partner, up to the lesser of $10,000 or half of your account won't be subject to the 10% early withdrawal penalty. Number 7 is education. Distributions are not subject to the 10% penalty if you use them to pay qualified higher education expenses. Number 8, emergency personal expense. This is another new one. You can make one distribution per calendar year for personal or family emergency expenses up to $1,000, and that will not be subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. Number 9 is equal payments. So if you create a 72T plan, and that's something I've mentioned in previous podcasts, it's a series of substantially equal payments. Those distributions are not subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. Number 10 is home buying. If you're a qualified first-time home buyer, which actually includes previous homeowners who haven't owned a primary residence in the past 3 years, you can withdraw up to $10,000, which will not be subject to the 10% penalty. Number 11 is a levy. If you have to withdraw funds due to an IRS levy to satisfy a tax debt, those distributions from your IRA are not subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. Number 12 are medical expenses. If you withdraw funds to pay unreimbursed medical expenses that exceed 7.5% of your gross adjusted income, they won't be subject to the 10% penalty. Number 13 are medical premiums. If you're unemployed, you can make withdrawals to pay health insurance premiums without paying the 10% penalty. Number 14 is for the military. Certain distributions to qualified military reservists who are called to active duty won't be subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. Number 15, returned IRA contributions. So let's say you make IRA contributions, but later you decide that you didn't want to do that. You want the money back. If you reverse your IRA contributions by your tax filing due date or any extensions, your earnings on those funds would be taxable, but the withdrawal would not be subject to the 10% penalty. Number 16 are rollovers. Eligible distributions you contribute to another retirement plan within 60 days won't be subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. And number 17 is unemployed health insurance. Any distributions to pay for health insurance if you're unemployed for 12 weeks and you received unemployment compensation in the year of the distribution or in the following year, those distributions will not be subject to the 10% withdrawal penalty. It's kind of like the previous one I mentioned, number 13 for medical premiums. Now, I want you to note that these penalty exceptions apply to IRAs, not to workplace retirement plans like a 401k or 403b. Workplace plans have different withdrawal rules. So again, we're only talking about IRAs here and specifically a traditional IRA. So let's get back to Helene's question. Should I take a traditional IRA withdrawal? Well, Helene, I generally don't recommend tapping a traditional IRA early. However, if you qualify for one of the penalty exemptions, it certainly costs less. And as I mentioned, Helene's age would make her withdrawal a penalty exception. You eventually must pay income taxes on traditional IRA balances that were not previously taxed. So one consideration should be how a traditional IRA withdrawal would affect your taxes in the current year. Helene mentioned earning about 1/3 of her previous salary before getting laid off. Adding a few $1,000s to her lower annual income wouldn't have a substantial negative impact on her taxes, but she would have to have enough in savings to pay the tax liability. However, since Helene said that she could cover her living expenses and still invest for retirement, I recommend not raiding her IRA to pay off her car loan. Keeping her IRA balance intact allows it to grow, and that could be worth much, much more to her in the long run. While I definitely understand feeling anxious about debt, $3,700 is a relatively small amount with a very meager interest rate. If Helene temporarily pauses her retirement contributions or reduces them, she could send more to her auto loan monthly and eliminate it faster. Helene mentioned having high-yield savings worth a few months of living expenses that she could use to pay off the loan ahead of schedule. She didn't mention the interest rate, but I got the impression that it may be higher than her IRA earnings, which she said was a 3.5% return. Helene, that concerns me because we've had a terrific year in the markets. As of November 4, 2024, the S&P 500 has increased by over 20%, with 47 new all-time highs in 2024. So I definitely recommend that you get professional help reviewing how your IRA is invested. Owning a diversified index fund would have yielded you much more than 3.5%. Helene, if you're ready to get rid of your low-rate auto loan, I recommend paying a little extra each month, but not tapping your savings or IRA, especially since the loan only charges you 2.79%, which is extremely low. If you tap your savings, you might need that money for an emergency and really regret having used some or all of it to pay off your car. And your IRA should only be used as a last resort so it can grow as large as possible before you need it for income. As you approach retirement, be sure to meet with a qualified financial advisor who can help you maximize your investments while considering your risk tolerance and goals. Helene, I know that may not be what you wanted to hear, but I think you're in a good position right now, and I think having a low-rate car loan shouldn't cause you any anxiety. It's, really a small amount with a very small interest rate, and I think you can earn a lot more than that percentage in your savings and in your IRA, maybe if you tweak the IRA a little bit. So I hope that's been helpful, and I hope reviewing the IRA penalty exceptions will also help you know if you do need to tap your IRA, some situations where it may cost less. That's all for now. I'll talk to you soon. Until then, here's to living a richer life. Money Girl is a quick and dirty tips podcast, and we have a terrific team. I want to thank Steve Rickyberg, who audio engineers the show. Brandon Gachus is our director of podcasts. Holly Hutchins is our digital operations specialist. Morgan Christensen is our advertising operations specialist. Davina Tomlin is our marketing and publicity associate. And Nathaniel Hoops is our marketing contractor.